Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and tonight on Sword and Sandal Cinema, we are graced by the scholars of from the edge of time, and we'll be starting with Michele Brittany. Greetings and welcome, Michele. How are you?
I am doing very well, and greetings to you, Hercules. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing very well. I'm looking forward to working out. I tried working out to Space Night, but I kept getting distracted and had to stop and look at the screen, then had to rewind because I couldn't put what I heard in context. So I figured I'll just sit and watch it for a while. And thank you to you, Nick, for reviewing it. It was a very enjoyable experience.
Oh, wonderful. So glad. We had a wonderful experience with it as well. And look forward to hearing what you think of it once you've concluded watching it and see what you think of our points and what you would bring to it as well.
I'm up to the part where Klaus Kinski sees the ancient alien or the alien and decides he's an angel there to teach him diabolical secrets. So that's at the point where I'm paused right now.
Yes, the secrets of the secret, or something like, or the secret of
Something
the
like that.
secrets, or something like that. Yeah, yeah. Fun, very fun. Well, I guess we could get started.
Okay.
As I alluded to last Thursday's conversation, I wanted to take my part of the hour to discuss Alexander, the Making of a God. It is a Netflix docu-series, 6 episodes, approximately 40 minutes each. It premiered actually back in January, right at the end of the month. It is produced by Tailfeather Productions in partnership with Lion TV. So British television, I believe, is where it kind of originates from. But it is a Netflix show. Um, let's see. Directors includes Hugh Ballantyne, Stuart Elliott, and Mike Slee. They're all kind of directors of either fiction or documentary. I think Hugh Ballantyne is kind of the lead director for all 6 episodes. He's award-winning. He's done a lot of different series that look at historical events or individuals and creates kind of a fictional narrative and merits blends it with academic discussion. And so Alexander is no different. There are 2 writers of the show, Christopher Bell and Jane McLean Guerra. Neither seem to have like extensive writing credits, which I thought was actually kind of interesting because I think the show does kind of balance between, the scholars that are on the show discussing Alexander and the different events versus kind of the narrative fictional portion to kind of give you a visual running of what is transpiring as Alexander is going on his big campaigns. So it does star Buck Brathwaite. He plays Alexander. Will Stevens is Hephaestion, kind of Alexander's one of Alexander's very close companions, and Dino Kelly, who plays Ptolemy. Kind of over on the Persian side, we have Mito Hamada, who plays Darius or Darius the Third, Agni Scott, who plays Stasteria, who plays his wife, and then Alan Ali Wadnevsky, who plays Mazizius. Sorry, not great on the Persian pronunciations. I'm trying.
You're
So I
doing great.
apologize in advance. Some of our scholars include Salima Akram. She's from the American University of Cairo. I actually have seen her in one or two talks in the past, so I'm very familiar with her scholarship. Lloyd Llewellyn Jones. So I know I shared this book last week, Persians, the Age of Great Kings. He
Mhm.
wrote this book as well as several others. He is from Cardiff University. That's in Wales, in case anybody's not familiar with Cardiff. And there are a handful of other scholars, but I just kept to those two that are from like Chicago, Scotland, University of California, Irvine, and a couple of others. There's also an archaeologist who kind of brings and ties everything together. She is a archaeologist. She's the director of the Hellenic Research Institute of Alexandrian Civilization, or the HRIAC. Her name is Dr. Limnos Papacosta, and she has been doing archaeological digs in Alexandria, Egypt, since approximately 2000. And so oftentimes, and I know I've seen her in the past on different shows where you know, she's kind of the premier expert on the artifacts that have been found in Alexandria. Alexandria is one of many cities that Alexander founded, designed, and kind of did the outline for, and then grew from there. Alexandria is kind of like one of the most, you know, ancient cities out there. It's one of the wonders of the world. You know, near it, obviously, we have the pyramids, but we also had the lighthouse of Alexandria, which was one of the wonders of the world. So generally, I looked at IMDb where I could get some information about the show. Its rating is a 5.4 out of 10. And I found that of the various reviews, I think there was probably around 85 or so. It seemed either people really liked the show or they really didn't like the show. There didn't seem to be a real in between. Generally, people, I'm going to say, that didn't really like the show cited several things. So the acting, not very good, historical inaccuracies, lots of gaps, a lot of events in Alexander's campaigns that were left out, so it felt narratively disjointed. Weak battle scenes was another criticism of the series. A lack of sources. The Oracle, she is the one that kind of opens each episode and then kind of concludes each episodes and talks kind of like as you know, in filmmaking, you'd have an establishing shot. Well, she's kind of the establishing character, and she kind of lays out what's going on, you know, with the characters, what's transpiring across the lands in this Egyptian temple. You don't know what the time frame is, you know it's antiquity. And then the last thing that I kind of gleaned from the criticisms is the costuming, which I'll just comment real quickly. You know, kind of coming off of the movies that we've watched, like the Tartars
Mhm.
recently, how we talked about those last month, and how, you know, there really seemed to be, they seem to be so advanced. They had these beautiful costumes and things like that, that I kind of harken back to a little bit of some of the older movies, and the costuming of the Persians versus other characters. Like, so in this case, you know, Alexander, you know, he's in more like kind of drab costuming. There are breastplates and things like that and helmets, but generally speaking, the more, I don't want to say buoyant visually are the Persians, but there's a reason I think that, the costuming is a little more, um, I'm going to say advanced, is because they were a more well-structured, well-established empire versus Alexander's campaigns. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. But like I said, at the beginning, there's 6 episodes. And so I thought I'd kind of highlight some of the activities in episode 1 and kind of talk about highlights. And then kind of skip ahead to episode 6, and how that kind of concludes. So in episode 1, I felt it was a really good setup as far as Alexander and Darius, because of the fact that, it kind of starts around 336 BC. Alexander's about 20 years old. His father is holding a wedding banquet for his daughter and son-in-law, and Alexander has been away. He's exiled himself to Illyria, which is kind of the land next door to Macedon, and he's returned. And there's this big wedding, and Philip, his father, is assassinated, and so Alexander takes the throne. But kind of what I had never known about was a lot of the political kind of powder keg that was existing at the time. Philip had his position, had his throne, but there seemed to be a lot of uncertainty about who might be the heir that would take over, because he had married another woman. There had been chatter in the court from like Attilius, who, challenged whether Alexander would be the heir, saying he was a bastard, saying that, he would not ascend the throne, that, King Philip's relationship with his new queen would, hopefully bring the heirs that, Macedon would need to lead them. And so you kind of have this boiling pot of political tension and intrigue going on. And I had always been under the assumption that Alexander kind of came from a more stable environment. So I felt it was really fascinating to learn more about what was happening at the time that he ascended the throne. At the same time, Darius, we get his side. And so you hear a lot from Dr. Llewellyn Jones, because he is kind of the subject matter expert about the Persians. So he talks a lot about how Darius comes to power. And what I never knew, I had assumed through first watching, and then as I'm watching the second time, that Darius had been on the throne for quite a long time. But he hadn't been. He had ascended the throne right around the same time that Alexander had. And so it was very fascinating to gain insight into Alexander coming from, a lot of disruption with his throne, a lot of violence, a lot of unknown, whether he was really the appropriate heir to take the throne, whether there was somebody else, the fact that, he had been in exile. So, the Philip's court was very much aligned to Philip, and there was a lot of loyalty to Philip. So, Alexander's having to come to, not only legitimize his ascension to the throne, but he also has to prove himself. And these are all kind of foundation things that I was unaware of. And then, of course, on Darius' side, he's also coming from kind of a violent um, political keg as well. I think the person that he succeeds from had been assassinated. So Darius is also ascending the throne. However, Darius has married uh, Stastara, who is Persian. She seems to have some royalty, definitely has the legitimacy. So whereas Alexander's, trying to prove himself and tried to, hold the throne, Darius kind of comes up, and even though it's perhaps maybe a little shaky that he's there, he gets his legitimacy through his marriage. And I think the ascension, he's there, he's part of the family that has been in rule. So he is there and he has legitimacy. So I found that actually very insightful to find out more about that, because for me, it's been many years since I studied world civilization history in
Mhm.
at college. So I do believe that we studied military campaigns and some of the strategies and things like that, but I don't really remember all that much. So I felt like watching the first episode was a great way to kind of, lay the foundation of both men and where it's going to take off from there. We also, I was also intrigued by the fact how much, I mean, we know that, Greek gods and mythologies was all existed, but I wasn't aware that Persians also had their mythology, their omens, their superstitions, their belief in the stars and dreams and things like that. So there's a lot of, well, there's a lot of differences between the two men.
Mhm.
And, the first episode talks about how there's a lot of differences. I also saw a lot of similarities that I think it would have been nice if they would have talked a bit more about some of those similarities and where they're kind of both gaining their footing from kind of similar positions. The other thing that I would say that kind of occurred during here is that we find out more about the Persian Empire itself. Something that I wasn't aware of is that at the time of Darius taking the throne, the Persian Empire was the largest. It was well structured. Egypt was under its control, and was in a key satrap, I think is what they would call their various warlords and the land that they controlled. Egypt was important because of the gold and the food that they gave as tribute to Darius there in Babylon, which was the kind of central. But also, when you think about the Persian Empire, you look at a map and you're like, wow, that's a lot of land. But then in the episode, it talked about that 50 to 150 million people,
Wow.
or approximately 50% of the world population, was part of the Persian Empire. So
Wow.
thinking about that, and then one of the scholars said, you think of that, and then you look at Macedon, or Macedon, which is small. It's kind of north in, what would be modern Greece, and it's just this little tiny country, and it's almost like um, a David and Goliath story in a way. That is really something I hadn't thought about. The first episode kind of wraps up with Attilius, uh, who receives a bribe from Darius, to kind of shift alliances. And, if he will align with Darius, they can take Macedon, and, he will be able to be even more powerful. And Attilius, doesn't do that. Even though he shamed Alexander, a couple of years before and ridiculed and questioned his, you know, being an heir to the throne. Attilius, throws his loyalty to Alexander. And I thought that that was an interesting revelation in the way that Alexander handles it. Because always in the stories that I can remember, Alexander was this, powerful man. Look at all that he did, the fact that he was able to, um, do as much as he did because he didn't force his own beliefs on other people and things like that. But with Attilius, he took that letter and accused Attilius of treason and aligning with Darius. And of course, that meant death. And so Attilius, who was one of the main generals, the other one I think was Parnian, I think was the other.
I think.
Yeah, he was the other primary general. He has to dole out the judgment. And, you don't get a whole lot of sense of their relationship, but there's probably mutual respect, and that there's, a sense of common loyalty and respect between each other, and then also to King Philip, but also knowing enough that now they have to shift alliance to Alexander, which probably was very difficult for Attilius. And so, he paid a heavy price for trying to create loyalty or create a sense of loyalty. And I think that, at least in the show, that's one of the first points where I think you see Alexander is more than just this, tactical, military, knowledgeable person in history, but that there's other sides to him, that there's other facets to him. And we see as the show progresses, two through 5 episodes, that he is kind of merciless as he moves through the Persian Empire to gain lands and to gain power over the Persian Empire. In the first episode, his mother, Olympus, tells him, when Alexander is kind of bobbling about, does he really deserve the throne? Is he really the heir to the throne? And she tells him, you need to prove yourself. And what is a way to prove yourself but to go after, basically it's an all or nothing, type of situation. And he goes after the Persian Empire. And of course, this series only focuses in on from 336 to about 330 BC, when Darius is assassinated by one of his warlords, Bessius, and Alexander looks to conquering and moving forward through the rest of the empire. So that kind of, brings about through episode 6, where they talk about some of the military strategies of the Greeks and the Persians and how they either work to counter each other, particularly Alexander. It seems like he went contrary to what was kind of standard military strategy. And I would say that would be one critique. I would kind of agree that I wish that there had been more battle scenes and a bit more military, the strategy, because there's points about it throughout the entire series, but I think a little bit more. I think the critics are a little harsh as far as the acting, I think the actors did a decent job. They're reenacting, and they're, trying to create the narrative. It's not meant to be historically completely accurate. I mean, we don't know what Alexander said, but we can kind of try to create an interpretation. And that's what this should be realized, is that this is, there's only 6 episodes, and you're talking about 12 years of activities, so not everything can be crammed in there. So you're not going to have historical accuracy, and it's going to be a bit disjointed because you have to kind of gloss over a lot of material to just kind of hit the real highlights. Yeah, I wish it was longer, and I wish that there had been more stories, but I think what that should hopefully lead viewers to do is to go and do research themselves. Start with Wikipedia and then go out from there. There are not original sources. The original sources during Alexander's lifetime no longer exist, but you have good secondary sources, such as Arian, who wrote from Ptolemy and Eratosthenes, sorry, and a few other writers that wrote around 1 AD, kind of the 1st century. You can look at those to get kind of a sense of who was Alexander and what were events. But unfortunately, we just don't have original documents. And I think lack of sources being cited in the show, I think that's really hard to do. I think, especially the way that it was presented, you can't break a scholar and say, well, according to, and name it off, and then talk about it, is a little hard to do with the way the material's been presented. If people remember, and you might remember, Michael Wood, he's an English historian. He did a series back in the 80s, so like he did In Search of the Trojan War. And he actually used diaries and letters and material, primary sources. And he'd go to these different places and he'd read from that, and then he would talk about it. So if people are looking for those kinds of things, go to Michael Wood, because you will get that kind of historical accuracy, that kind of discussion that those individuals are looking for. But I think that as far as the blending of the historical viewpoints that are brought to the show through the scholars, and then your historical drama, I think really kind of bring together. If you had one, like if you were just talking to scholars, I don't think you'd have the same interest that you would have by having both. And I think in kind of wrapping up, Alexander his legacy has been around for over 2,000 years. And, his legacy has something to say about that even though we don't have primary sources, we still have the legacy of his cities, such as Alexandria, and the artifacts that are being found and the buildings that are being found. The materials that are out there, such as the Alexander Romance, which was it's written in 338 AD, so it's way past when Alexander was alive, but it is kind of they believe, based on Alexander's court historian's notes, which no longer exist. And this has been around and in print for many, many years, many decades, hundreds of years, and it's antiquity's most successful novel. supposedly. And it still exists. Penguin Classics has it. So I'll be reading that because I'm interested in Alexander and his legacy and learning more about him and about Darius and all the various historical individuals at that time. It's an amazing legacy. It's an amazing hero's journey, to say. And I think it's definitely a series worth watching. Know that it's going to gloss over a lot, but it's a great first look and understanding of a little bit of Alexander and Darius, and hopefully a stepping off point to go and research and read more about it from the scholars that are presented on the show. And then, for instance, Dr. Llewellyn Jones, in his book, he actually has lots of further reading, lots of book suggestions. If you're looking for citations, unfortunately in this book, he didn't do citations, but his further reading, he does say that he did pull from all those books in which to create this book. So if you're looking for citations, definitely go and look for the scholarly presses, the university presses, and look for those if you really want to dig deep into the scholarship. But if you want to kind of start at the shallower end, start with a book like this, so that you can read it, and you're not disrupted by lots of endnotes or footnotes and all of that. So that's my cap of Alexander, the Making of a God on Netflix, and it's available right now.
That sounds awesome. It's available on DVD now or still on Netflix?
It's on Netflix. There is only one season, but it sounds like, because it has actually been very popular, there might be a second season. And in fact, if you go to IMDb, it's got 2024 dash and nothing more. So it sounds like maybe there'll be a second season, to kind of cover, continue covering his campaigns. And maybe they'll, through the criticisms and kind of reviews that are out there, maybe they'll kind of slow it down, and do a lot more coverage of his campaigns. So anyway, have you watched it, Hercules?
Oh, I haven't watched that yet, but I have Richard Burton's Alexander the Great and the several different versions of Val Kilmer's Alexander the Great.
Oh, I have not watched that. Is that very good?
Yes, it depending which version, some of the versions are better than those. I might have duplicates of that. Let me check my library. If I have duplicates of that, I'll mail them to you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I'm not sure that we actually had that one. I know Nick has Troy. I think, is that Oliver Stone that directed that one? I'm not
I
sure.
believe so. I'm not positive.
Oh, Wolfgang Peterson. Okay, he shouted in the background.
Okay.
So anyway, that is it from me for this Fit to Tuesday Scholars from the Edge of Time. And I am going to pass the torch over to my partner, Nicholas Diak, who is also a scholar, and here he comes. Yay. And I will pass the chair to him.
Thank you very much, Michele. That was awesome.
You are welcome.
Greetings, Nick. How are you?
Hey, Hercules, I'm doing all right. What's going on with your bad self?
Life.
Like, well, hopefully more good things than meh.
Always more good things.
All right, I got a short and sweet little mini scholars for you today. So, as we've talked about in episodes long ago, when I brought out show and tell with the Lone Wolf books, I am a big fan of the choose your own adventure style of books.
Yes, me too.
So I got a sample of them I'll show here in a second. That this is just the attention grabber before I actually get started. But I just grabbed what was off my shelf. I have a lot of different ones, the Dungeons and Dragons ones, classic Choose Your Own Adventure, classic Lone Wolf, Castle of No Return, Zork, the computer game,
I remember Zork.
Golden Dragon fantasy books, Escape from Tenopia, Time Machine, and lots more. So I just want to kind of establish I'm a big fan of the do you want to die in quicksand? Go to page 3. If you don't want to die in quicksand, go to page 5. The other thing I'm a fan of is Lovecraft stuff. With Michele, I co-host the HP Lovecast podcast. I do a lot of Lovecraft scholarship. Well, I happened upon a video game called The Innsmouth Case, which is basically a choose your own adventure Lovecraft in style text-based game that I played on Xbox. And I'm here to kind of talk about it a little bit.
Awesome.
So I should set the tone that before like the 2000s, 2000 mid-ease, Lovecraft wasn't in a lot of video games or computer games, except for maybe like Alone in the Dark or maybe like homage style, like through Doom or something. It wasn't until starting in the late 2000s, with the rise of indie gaming and indie developers, where you could have a solo developer or a small team that can make a video game on the cheap, or less expensive, and platforms like Steam that could distribute out there, that we actually started seeing Lovecraft themed video games. Some of them are like Call of the Sea, Call of Cthulhu, The Sinking City. I played a good chunk of those, and they're all fun. They all kind of do their own thing. And so the Innsmouth Case is one of these indie games. It came out last summer, 2023, from a German publisher or developer called Robot Pumpkins Games. Now, the game is truly choose your adventure style. It just doesn't have page numbers, but the interface looks like a book. The pages turn, and you're prompted with, do you want to do this or that? The story is basically a retelling or reimagining or something of Lovecraft's Shadow over Innsmouth. It hits the exact same main narrative beats. You take a bus to Innsmouth, you do some detective work, you stay at a hotel, and you're chased out by a mob. The same things that happen in the story happens in the game. The game, though, is slightly different. You're a detective, a very classic film noir style detective. A femme fatale comes into your office. She has a missing child. She wants you to go to Innsmouth to find the missing child, and off you go. The game doesn't have any graphics per se. Sometimes there's like a static background of like a picture of a cartoonish looking character, and they just kind of do the same motion, for movement. So it's not really graphical per se. So really it's Shadow over Innsmouth, but for detective. I was really hoping to like this game. It has some issues. The first one is it's also a comedy.
Oh
And
no.
it takes a very skilled hand to pull off noir and Lovecraft and comedy. Now, Lovecraft and comedy, absolutely. Noir and comedy, sure, but all three together, the only thing I can really think of is the that movie in the early '90s, Cast a Deadly Spell with Fred Ward, which was fun. But the comedy in this game is bad. It's when you start out in the game, you think you're like in the 1940s because the image looks like you're in the 1940s. You're a detective. The femme fatale walks in. She looks like she's in 40s. Nope. It turns out you're like in present day. Your character's complaining about in-app purchases in video games. Like, what? That doesn't make sense. I mean, that's not the style for this. I was expecting to be, the hard-boiled 1940s Lovecraft style, which is a very popular thing. But it doesn't work. The second thing is the game is really guilty of, and this is actually guilty in a lot of Lovecraft texts, and that's kind of the unnecessary Easter egging. And what I mean by that is a lot of Lovecraftian short films, stories, games, whatever, comic books, especially bad in comic books. What they'll do is they'll like proper noun name drop Lovecraft stuff in their story. And what I mean by that is, like, example, in this game, you'll walk down Ryla Street, and then no, I'm sorry, Ryla Road, and then Shoggoth Street, passing the Eric Zahn music store, and it's so groanerific. I mean, you don't I'm not a big fan of those kind of winks and nods, because I think they're kind of creative, low key, come up with your own kind of characters and stuff. But this game is filled with them, which is awkward because it's, for all their purposes, it's a Lovecraft game. It's Shadow over Innsmouth. So you don't need to unnecessarily Easter egg it. But there's some good stuff. There's some endings, because this is a choose your own adventure style, so there's multiple endings, and that's what the fun of these things are, is getting to the different endings. And usually they have a death by quicksand. I have not encountered a death by quicksand in this one, thankfully, but there was one particular ending where my character and a whole bunch of other tourists got conned into a spa wellness journey, and we wind up in a cage over the sea with Dagon monsters underneath us trying to eat us. And that's kind of funny, but at the same time, it's kind of really offbeat, especially since a lot of people are really committed to, wow, this spa treatment has taken a very long time. And you're like, you fools, there's Dagon creatures under us trying to eat us.
And they have a record store.
What's that?
And they have a record store.
They do. They have a, not a tiki bar, but there's also a bar on the coast in the game. But it's all these like kind of weird stuff. There's actually an entire sequence that you go into an arcade to search for the missing girl, and you wind up playing the machines there. And it's, I don't know, this tonality doesn't quite fit, or it could fit if it was in like maybe more capable hands, because there's a germ of a good idea here. What else do I have down here? That was really about it. So I like playing, the Lovecraft games out there, especially games like Sinking City, which we'll have to talk about in the future episode. I love the choose your adventure style. This game was kind of, it had the inklings of something cool there, with a bit of comedy, a bit of detective work, and a bit of Lovecraft that hasn't really been done before, especially in an interactive fiction style. And they just really couldn't pull it off. Now, maybe it's because it's a German developer, maybe there's a translation barrier or something. They couldn't get across a couple things. I'm not sure, but I wouldn't recommend it, except out of curiosity. But that's it. That's kind of what I wanted to talk about a little bit, was this choose your own adventure style game called Innsmouth Case. Shadow Innsmouth, the story's a bit better.
Thank you. And I like those types of games as well. And I was in high school when the hobby was born, role playing, long before there were computer games. I remember when Pong came out, and Tanks, and there were the early video games. But I used to like the Conan Pick Your Own Path. And then, of course, Greek mythology, Pick Your Own Path. And anything with barbarians and sword and sorcery I used to like as well. So I played the Dungeons and Dragons Conan Pick Your Own Path. There was a series called Sagard the Barbarian that I used to play. I tried the other ones that you mentioned, but I kind of always gravitated to Greek mythology and Sword and Sandal, and Sword and Sorcery.
I know growing up, when I was introduced to these types of books, it was at the same time I was a little kid, so I was also learning to program, and I was learning BASIC. This kind of, I mean, I was never a great programmer, but BASIC, things like 10 print high, 20 end. But it was very easy for me to make my own choose your own adventure books, because you could just, spit out to the screen. Type 1 if you want to enter the pyramid, type 2 if you want to investigate the whatever. So I could do that, and I felt very proud of myself when I created very crude choose your own adventure style games that I wrote in BASIC. None of that survives. That stuff is like 30 years old, long gone on some old 286. But I've got a soft spot for interactive fiction for sure.
As do I, as do many of the people in our audience. So Nick, thank you. Your timing is perfect too.
Oh yeah. No, Michelle had the meteor bit talking about Alexander stuff, all the good stuff. I went the short and sweet route, which worked out perfectly.
And it's a great topic, and I intend to cover it more when we evolve the Mythic Adventure show. And look forward to being invited to be a guest star on that when I've evolved it a little bit more. It's been
Oh,
running
cool.
for a few years. It's pretty much uh, divided into clear little boxes on different types of games. But we've been talking about doing something a little bit different. We started talking about being a DM and how to be a good and effective DM. So you're a fellow gamer, and I'd love to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah, no problem. I could talk about game books. I've got definitely my fair share of sword and sorcery and sword and sandal, COIA style books, and of course video games and whatnot. So, and tabletop RPGs. I'm a big nerd like that.
And how can people reach you and Michelle? Because
Uh,
you guys are incredibly awesome.
well, I'm easy to find. I'm at nickdiak.com. From there, links to all my social medias, Facebook, Twitter, all that fun stuff. List of all the podcasts and vidcasts that we've been on with you. Michelle doesn't do too much social media, but she does have an Instagram account that she shares some of her art and lots of cat pictures. I think if you search for art of Michele Brittany or House of the Moon Cats, that either or one of those will get you there. And you can also find her through my website as well, typically because I post her news there too. Yeah, the best avenues to get a hold of us.
Incredibly awesome. This will be up and on YouTube by tomorrow sometime. And I was concerned that your talk would be interrupted because it was thundering here. And I was
Oh,
thinking, don't shut off the electricity and finish the show. So Zeus heard me, and we made it to the end. Thank you so very much. Have an awesome day. And I told Michelle, thank you, because both you and her helped me make a dream come true. I've
uh-huh.
always been a fan of like lurid occult paperbacks.
Yeah.
And when I was starting to write beyond magazines and fanzines, you and Michelle suggested I try my hand at anthologies. So that proved to be a very good suggestion. I've been publishing over 20 anthologies, and I got a couple more coming out this year. And some of the companies that have been publishing my stuff are these lurid occult companies like Paranoia Press and Zontar Press and the Global Inner Light Press. And some of them have very lurid covers and titles. And I was actually, one of my chapters wound up in a book called Screwed by Aliens. So thank you for making a fantasy come true.
Hey, don't forget, get on Amazon Author Central. Get yourself an Amazon author page. Get all that stuff linked.
I have an Amazon author page.
Oh, okay. Oh, cool.
I have a Goodreads one too.
Uh, well, we'll see you next month, and we'll resume our Bella Cortez retrospective in May.
Very awesome. And we're going to do a in the new series, Sword and Sandals Superheroes, Strange Science in Outer Space. We're going to have panels. And one of the panels, the first one is going to be on Hercules versus the Moon Men. And another one is going to be with Bella Cortez. So to be continued. Thanks a lot, Nick.
All right. Have a great rest of the month and an upcoming May.
You too. Bye-bye.